I'm Jezzamine Wolk with Campus Reform. One professor at the University of Mississippi recently participated in the scholar strike, where professors across the country halted classes and other duties to protest racial injustice. Well, now one state auditor in Mississippi is launching an investigation into that professor at Ole Miss. Joining us now with more is that state auditor himself, Shad White. Thank you so much, Auditor White, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate you covering it.
So just start off by telling us what originally made you decide to take this on.
Sure. So a little bit of background. In Mississippi, we have what is called a no-strike law, and it basically states that public employees are not allowed to engage in a concerted work stoppage. And if they do, there are certain specific consequences that result. So one is that the Attorney General of the state of Mississippi is alerted. Another is that the employer shall file suit in court. Another is that the court shall order the termination of the employee's employment. So in this particular case that we're referencing today, there was a professor at the University of Mississippi who decided to go on strike for 2 days a couple of weeks ago. He went on strike in coordination with a national strike called Scholar Strike. He outlined some of the work-related activities that he would not be doing to his students in an email. He outlined them on Twitter. He described this as a, quote, work stoppage, which, believe it or not, is the exact same language that is used in the statute in Mississippi law, the exact thing that is barred by Mississippi law. He noted that he would not be responding to emails from students. He noted that he would not be answering Zoom calls. He would not be teaching classes, and he had 3 classes to teach on the 2 days that he was striking. He noted that he would not be doing office hours, and because he spelled all this out pretty specifically in an email and on social media, we noticed it here in the auditor's office, had folks ask us about it, and my role as state auditor in Mississippi is to make sure that public funds are not, quote, illegally expended. That's the statute that governs my responsibilities in my office. And in this case, what we see is a public employee who has violated the no-strike law. And in the opinion of my office, he cannot be paid for the 2 days that he did not work. So I sent a communication to the university and spelled that out. I noted that he had violated the no-strike law. I told the university that he should not be paid taxpayer funds for not working those 2 days, and then noted the consequences in the statute as well.
What is the goal here exactly of this investigation?
You know, the goal from the auditor's office perspective is to either make sure that he's not paid taxpayer dollars for the 2 days he did not work, or alternatively, if he is paid by the university, to get that money back for the taxpayers. You know, that money probably will come to a specific amount later, but that money probably amounts to about $400. Some folks say, well, that's too little to go after. Personally, in my opinion, we go after every single penny of taxpayer dollars that is misspent or stolen or misallocated. So for instance, in January, we went after $106 that had gone to a public employee in Mississippi that they had gotten illegally. In March, we went after $112. In the middle of those two, in February, we went after the largest public embezzlement case in Mississippi history, according to the records on file in the auditor's office. So in short, we go after big cases and small cases down to the penny. And in this case, we've got money, public money, taxpayer dollars that were expended illegally, or we suspect may be expended illegally if he's paid for those 2 days. And so my goal is to get that money back, or make sure that he's not paid that money. Now, aside from that goal, there's this bigger question of, okay, well, if this professor did violate the no-strike law here in Mississippi, and I believe he did, what are the consequences for him? And that's really going to be something that the employer, the University of Mississippi, is going to have to enforce. Their responsibilities under the statute are to file suit and to pursue the other remedies that are outlined in that statute.
Okay, so that's what I was going to ask you. Are you looking for him to lose his job as well, or you're mainly concerned about the money?
My role is to be concerned with the money, basically. The state auditor's job is to make sure that public funds are not illegally expended. As a part of that, though, we have to read these statutes and have to determine what is illegal, right? And so we read this no-strike law and we see that clearly what this professor has done violates that statute. Yes, that gives me the right and the ability to go after public funds if he's paid for those 2 days. But in reading that statute, I can clearly put my eyes on the other language in it and say, okay, well, In addition to that, the employer has certain responsibilities, and in a letter that I sent to the university, I quoted that set of responsibilities back to them, and we'll see what happens after this. My thought is that we will recollect the money, the taxpayer dollars that get paid to him, if it gets paid to him, and then our role in the case, my role in the case, will effectively be done, and then the responsibility will fall either on the employer or the attorney general to follow through with the rest of the statute.
Okay. And I know this is your alma mater, so you have your own history with them. What's been the response from them thus far?
Well, I talked to university leadership before we issued that letter, but after the strike had happened, and they were also at the same time doing their own inquiry into what had gone on. They, I believe, talked to the professor and tried to get details from him about the work-related tasks that he had not done, which services he should have been performing for students that he did not perform. And so I understand from them that they're kind of engaging in their own inquiry. I have not talked to them after the letter got sent to them. From my perspective, I know folks in my office have talked to them. From my perspective, we're going to do our part. We're going to do our job under the statute that governs the auditor's office, and then after that, they can figure out how to do their piece of the job. If the broader question is what's the response been from folks in the university, to be honest with you, whether it's professors or students or alums of the university, everybody's going to have an opinion about this because this professor was very well known among virtually everybody around the University of Mississippi. I really don't care. I don't care what other folks' opinions are of how I do this job. My concern is to follow the law. And I mentioned that we had a very large public embezzlement case a few months ago in February. That involved a large Republican donor who was very well known around Mississippi. There are plenty of folks who didn't like that I did that. I didn't care then. There are plenty of folks who don't like that I'm pursuing this professor for potentially being paid for days that he didn't work, and they're not going to like the fact that that I'm trying to enforce that law over here. I don't care about their opinions as well. My job is to care about what the law says and to make sure that people are following the law. And after that, everything else in my mind sort of takes care of itself. If I do a good job on that one question, are people following the law and am I enforcing the law adequately, then everything else is going to be fine after that.
I did read that you are getting some criticism for people saying that this is based more on politics and isn't necessarily worth an investigation from the auditor's office. So what would be your response to that specifically?
Well, it's funny. Those same folks didn't have a problem at all with me arresting a Republican supervisor several months ago in a rural Mississippi county. But as soon as I say, well, this liberal law professor over here was paid money in contravention of the law, then all of a sudden they get upset about it. It's almost as if those folks have decided what the outcome of a case should be based on the ideology of the subject. And I don't have that luxury under the law. I don't have the luxury of looking at somebody and saying, well, do I agree politically or disagree with them? And then use that as a basis for whether or not I enforce the law. I have to enforce the law even-handedly every single time. As you mentioned, there are some folks who say, well, this is just not worth your time. Well, not a single one of those folks complained a few months ago when we disclosed that we had that $106 case or that $112 case in March. What they want is for those cases to be enforced, but when it's somebody that they agree with, they don't want for those cases to be enforced. In other words, they're asking for special treatment for that professor, and I'm just not in the business of handing out special treatment.
So this actually isn't the first time this professor has made headlines. As you said, he's pretty well known. In 2018, he called on people to harass senators at restaurants. It was around the time of Kavanaugh's Supreme Court confirmation. And his efforts to gain tenure last year was met with resistance by the state's college board, but he was eventually approved. And his argument was that political speech has no place in tenure decisions. So what would be your response to that? Should he have gotten tenure in the first place when he was known for rocking the boat?
I'll be honest, I don't know the terms of tenure. I'm not on the college board. I don't look at those regs to see, okay, well, who merits tenure, how much research do you have to do, all that sort of stuff. To me, that decision is in the past and not one for me to question. What is important here is whether or not he does something that violates the laws around how we spend public money here in Mississippi. And if he violates those laws, then I'm duty bound to hold him responsible for that. Now, I do think that what you see in his history is a willingness to put everything out in the open on Twitter, to put all his thoughts and everything that he's doing out on Twitter. And that's actually something that made this case a little bit easier. So he spelled out in detail the nature of his strike, both on Twitter and in an email to his students. And so for us, that fortunately made it pretty easy to go in and just screen capture the tweets that he had issued. The email that he had issued to students had been screen capped. It looked like by a student who received the email, and that was circulating on the internet. So that was obviously easy for us to grab too. And then we've gone in and looked at the other emails that he sent during that period as well. So, his outspoken nature has made it easy for us. But frankly, I don't care what he said prior to this. I don't care what his political philosophy is. Really, for me, the question is, did he get paid money that he shouldn't have been paid?
Why is it so important for him to face repercussions for this?
Well, one is that the law is a law, and everybody has to abide by the law. I have laws that govern my job here as state auditor. We all have to pay our taxes, and we're not allowed to walk into a store down the street and rob something, steal something out of the store. And so we all have these laws that oversee our behavior. And in this case, he's got laws that apply to him, and he's got to follow those laws. The other thing that I would say is the University of Mississippi is a public institution. It's financed by taxpayer dollars in part. And the folks who are going to that university, the students, deserve to get the benefit of those taxpayer resources. They deserve to learn from the teachers who we're paying. And the taxpayers deserve to get the efforts of those teachers because we're writing their paychecks. And in this case, if you don't show up to work and you engage in a work stoppage, his words, not mine, if you engage in a work stoppage, and there's a state law that says public employees cannot engage in a, quote, work stoppage, we've got a problem. All of a sudden, a person has been paid or will be paid public dollars for something they didn't do. I mean, not only is that a violation of state law, it's actually in Mississippi a violation of the state constitution. The state constitution says that the government cannot make donations. So we can't pay money for nothing. The taxpayers are not in the business of paying public dollars for no property or no assets or no work at the end of the day. And that's potentially what has happened here.
And what's the latest? Where does this investigation stand as of right now?
So actually, just before we hopped on the call, I just got briefed by the lead investigator here in the auditor's office. We're gathering up the last few documents that we need and are going to package that up, send it over to the university. When we send that over to the university, we're going to inquire about whether or not he has been paid or will be paid for the 2 days that he didn't work. So my understanding is that they had a pay period that ended on the 15th of the month. It's possible he was paid for those 2 days then. He may be paid at the end of this month for those 2 days. We're going to figure out if he's been paid for those 2 days. If he has, we're likely to issue what we call a demand to him saying you have to pay that money back. So, that demand will go to him, and he'll have 30 days in which he can pay it back. If he doesn't pay the money back within 30 days, that demand and all the information gets forwarded over to the Mississippi Attorney General's office for them to litigate and enforce in court. But my hope is that we don't ever get there. My hope is that either the university doesn't pay him for those 2 days, or if they have paid him for those 2 days, that we'll issue the demand and he will pay that money back. After all, this is a work stoppage that he engaged in. So I'm assuming that in his mind, he thinks that this work stoppage was worth it. It was to make a point, and the taxpayers shouldn't have to subsidize that work stoppage. So hopefully he'll pay that money back. And then for the auditor's office, the public will be made whole, and that will sort of be the end of the issue for us.
Okay. Any final thoughts, Auditor White?
No, I thank you for covering this and appreciate Campus Reform stepping in and covering it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Keep us posted.
Thank you.